And all right, looks like we're live, streaming on both Facebook and on YouTube. If you're only connected to one, make sure you, get connected on both, man. Subscribe or follow the page, depending on whichever one you're looking for. Hopefully we get some people connected on both. But good morning and happy Thanksgiving week as we get started here. As you might imagine, I'm probably not going to do a stream on Thursday. I think it's a pretty safe bet. With it being the holiday and all, I kind of prefer to focus on family, and I'm sure there'll be still, strangely enough, things going on that early in the day. Actually, now some of the folks in the family like to eat a little bit earlier, so I think we'll probably be somewhat involved in that, in those festivities. So look forward to that. Not for me, but just the holiday, because it's coming. So. But good morning, and again, if you're somehow coming across this without already having the knowledge, my name is Dennis Misigoy, Libertarian, running for U.S. Senate here in the state of Florida. And getting onto these live streams, trying to talk to folks about things that are going on. A couple things that were interesting to me, and again, let me give a shout out to the Libertarian Party of Polk County here in Florida. Got to visit with them last night. Great group of people and a nice setup that they've got over there. Really worth checking out if you are in that area whenever you have the chance. Please always, and I would encourage anybody who's listening to this stuff, even if you're not necessarily a registered libertarian yet, but if you are in the state of Florida, really get out there and get involved with the local affiliate so that the work can move forward, man. And but great group of folks out there. Had a chance to speak over there. It's a holiday week, so maybe not the best conditions, but in terms of just bringing people out, but a real good time, and I'm thankful for the opportunity. Brought a couple things to my mind that I want to talk about today, kind of go a little bit more into, but first things first. One of the big news items of the last week, obviously, was the Rittenhouse verdict that came in at the end of last week. As I kind of expected, based on all the evidence that was presented, which was pretty clear cut, it was a case of self-defense, and he got acquitted of all charges. But interestingly enough, after that, there was a lot of other talk about other cases that were going on, and I can think of 3 different ones that kind of came to my attention. Let me put it that way. So one of them was a verdict that came on the same day, which was actually here in Florida, in Indian River County, I believe. The Andrew Coffey, the 4th case, where he was acquitted of murder charges, murder and attempted murder counts, which stemmed from an incident. I'm trying to remember the date on the incident. I don't believe, I think it was last year. But he was at home, essentially what appears to have been close enough to a no-knock raid, where police came to the home to serve a warrant, actually against his father, drug-related. Interestingly enough, his father was actually right there at the door, so they got him immediately when they came in, but for whatever reason felt the need to then start throwing flashbangs and firing off. So a firefight ensued because he was upstairs, not knowing who was breaking into the home. His girlfriend was there also at the time, Alteria Woods, who ended up getting shot by the police, shooting up at them, and died as a result. And strangely enough, not only were the police, well, I guess I shouldn't say strangely enough, this is kind of what we expect, is that the police were going to be acquitted, or not acquitted, not even charged with anything related to her death, but that charges for her death, murder charges related to her death, were actually then put on Andrew, which doesn't make any sense. When somebody else shoots somebody, to put the murder charge on a different person who didn't shoot at them, it's pretty wild. So this is kind of sadly what we kind of end up expecting. And actually, we have similar thing in another case that I'll mention in a moment. But he was acquitted of the murder and attempted murder charges related to the incident. However, he's still looking at a give me one sec. Looks like we're having a little trouble with the feed. I think we're back. having a little trouble with the feed there. So we are, but Mr. Coffey's facing still up to 30 years in prison on a charge of firearm possession by a felon. Now this goes to sort of another weird thing in terms of, again, how we treat the Second Amendment, and also in terms of what do we do with folks who have criminal records and they get released out into the public. And one of the things I largely object to is the fact that if if a person can't be trusted with a firearm, if a person can't be trusted with the full set of rights, they shouldn't be released out into the public. If you're able to release somebody out into the public, then they should. If we do have a situation where we can release someone out into the public, they should come back with their full rights. And not doing that creates these kind of situations that just set people up for failure. And I would actually argue that somebody who is coming from a background where they have been involved in crime, excuse me, just trying to swipe something off with the camera there, it's actually specifically because of situations where people have had involvement in, people have been involved in criminal world, or they have a criminal record. Those are probably the folks that are most likely to need to be able to defend themselves because they have a connection to this world and they are at risk. I remember specifically a case, I don't have the names, but is actually something my wife worked on when she was in law school many years ago. This was in D.C. back when they had the gun ban, but it was a gentleman who had been involved with crime, got out of it, but again felt uneasy with where he was and some of the other folks around it. This is a person who's really in a spot, also economically disadvantaged, and probably in a community where there is a bit more crime, a bit more violent crime. They're the ones who are most likely going to need to be able to defend themselves. They're not going to be, having the police at their beck and call. They're not going to have armed security. They need to defend themselves. These are people who are most likely going to need to have that Second Amendment right, and they shouldn't be. They certainly shouldn't be punished for exercising it when, intruders break into their home and they don't know who it is, and shots are being fired, and grenades are being thrown, and all this. It's crazy that this is the situation, and so, but that's just one case. But he's still looking at facing this charge, which really he shouldn't. If he's been released to the public, if he's as we say, he's paid his dues, paid his debt to society with his time in prison in the past, and he's been released to the public, then he should have his full set of rights. So other cases that have come up which are interesting, one of them actually in Kenosha, Wisconsin itself, so we're talking about pretty much the same prosecutors as well, is the Crystal Kaiser case. And this one's real interesting because, again, you have a 17-year-old who took a person's life, but you're talking about a young woman of color who was a victim of child sex trafficking and reached a point where attempting to escape took the life of her captor, her abuser. And it's interesting because Wisconsin law apparently has a specific carve-out, specific kind of exception defense rules related to in specific victims of this kind of crime as a defense when this sort of situation occurs. Initially, the prosecutors were able to block her from, I guess, using this as a defense or presenting this in court. Then they were able to and I believe there was an initial conviction. The event went down, I think, back in 2018 was when the death occurred, and since then she was able to win an appeal to be able to use that as a defense. Now the prosecutors are fighting that tooth and nail. Again, even though Wisconsin law has a specific carve out for it, and even though pretty much any sane moral person would look at that and say, this woman is a victim of abuse, this young woman, at the time 17 years old, and she had already been trapped in there for quite some time. Someone in that extreme circumstance and the victim being the captor, abuser, trafficker, for that person, most rational, moral people in that situation would say, yeah, she shouldn't really be in prison for life based on that. It's this is just wrong. But the prosecutors, again, are motivated by an agenda, by the self-interest of just going after convictions. It was interesting. I was just having back and forth with somebody on social media about this sort of thing and the fact, and I think it was coming out of something from a Kyle Rittenhouse interview. I don't know if it was the Tucker Carlson one, but said something to the effect of, look what they try to do to me, they'd be trying to do it to all these other people. And someone just said, that's just what it is, because they're just trying to get convictions. And I said, this is really problematic if they're just trying to get convictions without regard for innocence or guilt, with a completely disregard for innocence or guilt. In theory, and again, prosecutors are supposed to be working for the public here. I don't think the public wants to have innocent people thrown into prison. The public wants to have a determination, intelligent thought about who's guilty or not guilty, and have the prosecutors who work for us as the public pursue those that they believe are actually guilty of these crimes, not to just try to pad their resume with as many convictions as they can. But that's the Kamala Harris way, and I guess a lot of prosecutors, because again, they have the conflicting interest of trying to forward their career by showing that they can do this. And again, it also gives them an incentive to target, I guess, the low-hanging fruit, to target poorer defendants who are less likely to have the means to defend themselves from these kind of charges. It creates all sort of terrible incentives. And so even if we can't necessarily strip that out, because maybe it is so inherent in what the system is, the one thing we can do is at least shed some light on it and make sure that there's a broad understanding of that amongst people in general, because I don't think there is. I think people take at face value the idea that when someone is arrested and prosecuted, that there's a credible belief in their guilt, rather than the prosecutors and police. And maybe there is to some extent, but I don't think properly. I think there's still the assumption that there's all these other factors playing in, or whether it's purely racial or whatever else. I think people need to recognize that these folks are what the agenda is. And that's not to say that there's not honest and ethical prosecutors out there. I try not to paint with too broad a brush, but this does exist, and we're able to see it right here. And it was on display with the Rittenhouse case. It's on display with the Kaiser case, Crystal Kaiser case. If you're trying to look it up, it's Kizer. Not like Kaiser, not like Kaiser Wilhelm or something. So, one other case that I thought was interesting and related to that, and also similar to what they try to do in the coffee case, which was, and this one I think a bit more recent, was I believe she's 8 years old, a young lady named Fanta Ability in Philadelphia area. I don't know exactly where the incident occurred, but it was outside of like a high school football game or something. There was an argument between two other teenagers, totally unrelated to this, who pulled guns on one another. There was some shooting, but I think one of them maybe hit somebody else. Nobody was killed from that. However, police, in sort of response to this, fired in a completely different direction or somewhere else, ended up killing this 8-year-old girl. And the real kicker about it is that not only did the police, so far at least, have gotten away with no charges, no accountability, and are unlikely to face any accountability, certainly not individually, and I guess really not at all when you really think about it, but the police not getting in any trouble for doing that, and actually the murder charges for this young girl are being thrown on to the two guys who were in the argument and shooting at each other, but really had nothing to do with the police shooting this girl. They didn't shoot at her. Nobody even contests that fact, and yet charges for her death are going on these guys rather than on the police who actually pulled the trigger. So ideally, how do we hold the police accountable? That's a great question, and sorry I haven't been too much on the comments just yet, but holding the police accountable, this is not an easy thing to do, because as one of the things we know about is qualified immunity. In theory, because we know the criminal system, there's a naturally going to be a bias. Unfortunately, just by the nature of the criminal justice system, police work with prosecutors, so there's an interrelationship there that it's very unlikely in most cases. And we saw sort of this thing also with the Ahmaud Arbery case, which is going on now, but the fact that initially it was such an issue because the father of the McMichaels, I forget which one it is, Travis or Gregory, I just know the names, and that it's a father-son, but I don't remember which one it is, but had worked for a long time with the prosecutor's office there. And police in general work with prosecutors because, I mean, it's a natural relationship. And because of that, it's very unlikely that you're going to have prosecutors go really hard after police in these kind of situations. Even if it's not a police officer, they personally have a relationship. There's that sort of intermingling of relationship that, and they're always going to be kind of given the benefit of the doubt and so forth and so on. So it's very difficult to expect it to happen in criminal justice, but we should at least be able to have it through the civil courts. And that's where qualified immunity comes in. And I believe, if memory serves me correctly, that I'm trying to think if I'm thinking of the Alteria Woods' death in the Coffee case, or if I'm thinking of the Fantability case. I know about the family, and this is what usually happens. The family tries to sue. Now, the family can't end up suing the individual officers who actually did it because of qualified immunity. Qualified immunity, if you're not familiar with it, protects those the individual officers from culpability for stuff like this that happens in the line of duty. There are cases where that gets waived, stuff like with the Derek Chauvin case, I think killing George Floyd, where they might consider it a little bit more egregious. But in general, a lot of these times, police are obviously not prosecuted by the prosecutors. They are then not able to be held accountable through civil courts due to qualified immunity. So what ends up happening is the families end up suing, but they sue the police department or the city or whoever, and that is where we get the kicker right here, is that the settlements to the victims end up just getting paid by everybody else, the taxpayer, which includes the victims themselves usually, because it's probably happening in their same community. So rather than actually anybody who's actually responsible for it having to pay, it's you who gets to pay, even though you did nothing wrong. So money comes out of wherever else it may have gone within the sort of public sphere, and now has to be paid out for these misconduct. And again, nobody gets held accountable, or even worse. And one of the more egregious ones of the past bunch of years, I think in terms of, especially once the video came out, was the Daniel Shaver case. And in particular, the outcome of it, because first that Philip Brailsford, the officer who basically killed him for losing a game of Simon Says, if you really think about it, not only got off without any real punishment, he was actually able to then go turn around and get rehired, retire, claiming disability due to PTSD from having murdered an unarmed man in a hallway, and is now collecting a taxpayer-funded pension as a result of him killing, an innocent guy who hadn't violated anyone else's right, who wasn't a threat to anyone, who was begging and crying for his life in a real sad incident. And there are so many of these. Doctors have malpractice insurance in case of killing someone in their job. Can this be done by law enforcement? Sure it can. There's no reason why not. The only thing that's preventing us is the fact that they're shielded from this. Because they're shielded from it, they don't feel the need for it. We've seen many times when people have talked about this and proposed it, that we get a sort of negative response from law enforcement, where people say that, where folks say that if we take away qualified immunity and protections like this, that people aren't going to want to be police officers. To which I think a lot of us say, well, look, if a police officer doesn't want to be, needs protection to be held from being accountable for any of what they're doing, for any wrongdoing, then we don't want that person as a police officer. And again, I think there's also something else to be said about how many police officers we need. And it all, a lot of this also roots down to the kind of laws we try to enforce. And I'll get to that in a second. Hi, Chris. See the comment on the YouTube stream. And I guess maybe to kind of segue from that to another thought, because in the past decade, where we've had a bigger conversation about police violence, overuse of force, and this and that. One of the things that I remember, I haven't heard it as much in the last few years, but I remember hearing a lot back in the, get both streams up, got the connection back. One of the things I heard repeated a lot back in the day by folks who were supporters of the police on these issues was that they used to say, we don't make the law, the police don't make the laws, they just enforce them. But unfortunately, I think as a society, we never took the conversation the next step over and said, well, okay, if they don't make the laws, who does make these stupid, terrible laws that are creating these circumstances, these situations for these negative interactions? Who's creating this? And there's not enough. We never took that next step and looked at who's making these laws, what are these laws, because this is one of the things where we create these opportunities. The Andrew Coffey case is one where they're serving a warrant related to drugs. Again, if we didn't have drug prohibition, there are a lot of interactions, and if we didn't criminalize activities that were voluntary interactions between people, things which didn't involve violations of another person's individual rights, if we didn't have those sort of things criminalized, we wouldn't have these sort of events occurring. So, or we would have, let me put it this way, we would have fewer opportunities for this sort of thing, which in turn I think would contribute to, or stop contributing towards an adversarial relationship that exists between police and a lot of the communities that they serve, a lot of the communities that they need to serve more. But instead you have everybody sort of picking their side in a conflict rather than trying to take an objective view and say what was misconduct, what should and shouldn't have been done, and really trying to hold people accountable. Unfortunately, it becomes us versus them. And when us versus them is the police versus their community, that's real bad for everyone. And it leads to a lot of the stuff that we've seen. So, it's something that we all need to have in mind as we consider that topic. I'll segue even from that into a slightly different one, but still related, because it was a topic that was actually brought up, and I need to share on my feed. It might show up there anyway because I was tagged on it, I believe. But the video from the Polk County LP meeting last night, where I got a chance to speak to them over there. One of the things also happened there was new candidate announcement. I don't know the district, but Ali Kelly from there, at least based out of Polk County. I don't remember the actual district, the district number, but she announced she's running for State House. And one of the issues that she brought up two issues. One was talking about education, which should be a state and local issue. As a candidate running for federal office, obviously I'm recognized also as a libertarian and someone who believes in abiding by the Constitution, that the U.S. Constitution does not give the federal government any role to play in education. It doesn't authorize it in any way. If we follow the 10th Amendment, the federal government shouldn't be engaged in education. But one of the other issues that she mentioned, one of the other subjects that she talked about was red flag laws. And in particular, it's interesting because Florida is one of the only red states, like clearly red state, clearly solid Republican majority in the state government, the legislature, and obviously the governor, the governor's office are all in the executive branch heavily Republican, and yet we have red flag laws, which, if you're not familiar with, is this set of laws or kind of law that allows police to confiscate and an individual's guns based on some kind of warning or tip or whatever creates very low standard for police to be able to seize a person's gun. And a lot of this was done in response to the shooting at the Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, and that's been going on for a few years. It was passed by Republicans here in Florida, and actually Florida has been one of the states that, or I believe is the state that has used it the most. And actually they were mentioning there, in particular interest to them, where I think Polk County actually has the highest incidents where the police have been using this to go and seize people's guns. It's a violation not just of the Second Amendment rights, but of the Fifth Amendment. I believe it's the 14th I believe it's the 14th that also guarantees us due process, guarantees us that we can be secure in our life, liberty, and property. Property does matter. With due process, and that we're guaranteed due process. And so it is really important for us to try to uphold those constitutional protections and recognize where these things are violating them. Now, it's a particular point of interest for me, those particular laws, because while that is something that's already going on in Florida at the state level as a state issue, it is also something of a federal issue because our incumbent senator currently, Florida's U.S. Senator, I guess senior U.S. Senator now, Marco Rubio, is like Mr. Red Flag Law in the U.S. Senate. He has been proposing red flag laws pretty much every year since the school shooting here. And whatever one wants to consider his motivations, one thing that we need to recognize is that it is an attempt to expand government power and to try to push it nationwide to allow government to subvert the gun rights of individuals, the right of individuals to own firearms, and subvert due process in that as well. And again, it's something that every gun owner, and in particular every gun owner who looks at it from the standpoint of part of this is about having the means by which to resist government tyranny. We are living in a very interesting time where we see in other countries in particular where we have nationwide lockdowns, again, but almost 2 years after all of this began. We know it's being terribly ineffective, just like with so many of the mandates, the vaccine mandate, even in countries where literally they have 100% of the adult population vaccinated with at least 2 shots and a significant portion with the third with the booster shot, and they're still seeing massive outbreaks. I believe, don't quote me on this one, but I believe I saw a statistic that even said here in the U.S. we had actually had an increased number of COVID deaths in 2021, actually more in 2021 than we had in 2020. And that's after vaccines and all of this. So take from that what you will. That's not that doesn't, one can make the argument that is driven by the unvaccinated and the letting up of lockdowns and stuff. You'd probably have to analyze the data a little bit more, but it certainly is interesting to see. And we do know that transmission, that infection transmission and everything else has occurred, even to death, even where we've seen with prominent figures, like with the, big deal made with Colin Powell's death, although we can always point out the fact that there's a lot of comorbidities, but that happens with a lot of the folks who've died from COVID. So it is a lot to consider about it. But again, taking a step back to red flag laws again, Marco Rubio has demonstrated himself through this pursuit, consistent pursuit, I should say, that he's not a friend to the Second Amendment, to gun owners and folks who in particular recognize that the purpose of this is to be able to have the means to defend oneself from a government that has gone full tilt, tyrannical, authoritarian, that individuals need the means to be able to resist, to be able to protect themselves. And not just in that scenario, but obviously in a lot of different scenarios. We were just talking about the Kyle Rittenhouse case. I don't know that it would be a more desirable outcome if he wasn't armed and he was still attacked by Joseph Rosenbaum. So, which is really what started everything that occurred over there. So, if we recognize the need for that, then we need to recognize that government, just like it can't be trusted with so many other things, really cannot be trusted to be determining who can and cannot own firearms. Certainly not without due process. Due process at least offers some protections, and so at least if you have some due process in there, unlike what old President Trump said a while back, I like to take the guns first and due process second, and we don't like that. If we believe in the Second Amendment, if we believe in the Constitution in general, and these, in the Fifth Amendment and these other constitutional protections, we believe that due process needs to come first. And certainly when it comes to restricting a person's rights, it is of the utmost importance, and we need to be willing to stay steadfast in that. And so that's why I say to anyone who has or who recognizes this, please, I need you guys to get on board, give me your support, because if we can't offer an alternative, then all we're going to have is two anti-Second Amendment candidates, because obviously we know what the Democrats are going to offer us. We know what Marco Rubio is going to offer us, so there's not really going to be another alternative if we don't put an alternative on the ballot. That's what I'm trying to do here by running, by filing, but I need your support. If you can hit the link that is in the description here and visit the page, contribute what you can. If you can't contribute, if you can volunteer, whatever you can do, I really appreciate it, but it is of the utmost importance because, like I said, Marco Rubio is pushing this nationwide in terms of red flag laws. Val Demings, the likely Democrat candidate for this seat, she has already, voted for it. Well, part of what was included in the 2022 fiscal year NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, actually included a red flag law for military personnel. So she's already voted for one of these. He's keeps on proposing and sponsoring. She'd be behind it. He is behind it. So there's no question. If you're against it, please give me your support. It's Misigoy.com. You got the URL down here. Here, I'll throw the other one up just for a sec, too. So you got this one up here. And, please come on out. And need your support. So please, we can't do this alone. Let me bring this down. And, thank you guys. And again, I'm going to say for sure, we're going to take Thursday off. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the time with family. Be thankful for what we have, but remember that everything we're thankful for, we need to also be vigilant and be willing to protect and uphold. I want to take the path of least resistance. I don't want it to be violent. I want it to be, let's win at the ballot box. Let's take it one step at a time, though, because we can't wait till Election Day. If you want to have the option, we need the support. So please come on out, hit the link, whatever you can do. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys, and I'll talk to you guys next week. And obviously, if you want to catch me on social media, you can, and so I try to always be in communication. But I'll see you guys next week. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.